Okay, so let's pick up on the first of our topics, and this is the GitOps Report 2025. Steve, I know you've been right smack in the middle of this, so I will let you maybe kind of do a quick intro to the report itself, why you guys are kind of, compiled it, and maybe also some of the kind of, questions that you guys asked in the report itself, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a huge fan of research in software delivery. I've been following the State of DevOps report for forever. I think it's brilliant that we're actually digging in and testing to see what works and trying to understand it better. I remember when I was first starting out, there were lots of really knowledgeable individuals who'd been doing software forever, and we were like listening in, right, to Barbara Liskov and Kent Beck and all these greats of software delivery.
Right.
And they would tell us what worked for them. But now we're kind of moved to the next stage where we're like, let's test whether that thing does help us achieve the things that we want to achieve.
Right.
So I'm a huge fan of all of that effort. And I think it's like a new era for software where we're going to test those ideas out, which I think is very cool. And as part of that, I had an opportunity to delve into GitOps, which hasn't really been looked at in that level of detail yet. So we went out, we recruited as many people as we could to complete our survey, got 660 responses, and we're super grateful to all of the people that gave us responses, because without that, we wouldn't have been able to work out all of these statistical relationships. And we dug in to find out, we were asking questions like, what specific practices are they doing for GitOps? Most people are like using version control, but are they using the other practices that we associate with GitOps, like the automatic pull and continuous reconciliation? And we wanted to know what tools they were using, how they define success, what does success mean in GitOps, and whether they were actually getting those success criteria. Was that what they got in return for GitOps?
Right.
So yeah, we got to kind of look at this whole broad thing. I learned loads. Like I thought I knew what GitOps was, and then when we started like interviewing people and doing surveys, I was like, it turned everything on its head, and it was just surprises at every turn.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think you're quite right, and maybe the initial sort of challenge for people is actually understanding what GitOps is and where it actually fits in. And I've still not really got my head fully around that. And again, and I've actually stood up and presented on it, to DevOps people and so on. But I understand the kind of the concepts and so on, kind of the tooling and kind of the flow and things like that. But yes, there is a lot more to that. So what was kind of and so just before we do that, so this came out in June, is that right, Steve?
That's right. Yeah, the survey finished a little while before that. It took us a long time to actually analyze it. I learned Python and pandas and all these libraries along the way to actually get really deep into the data. So that's been really fun as well.
Right. Okay. And so you didn't use any Gen AI or anything to kind of help you along the way?
I admit Claude did help me with my background is a lot in C#.
Yeah.
And in C#, naming conventions are really solid. Like you can start typing and autocomplete will just help you anyway.
Right. Yeah.
With Python, trying to remember, because there's abbreviations and sometimes words are separated with an underscore and sometimes they're not. Right. And arguments seem to be in completely random orders. So I used Claude to constantly look up what's the name of this function, what's the arguments I need to pass.
Right. Fabulous. So you really kind of use Gen AI in the way that it should be used as a sort of a helper for you and augment you. Excellent. Okay, and the report is done in association with CodeFresh, I believe. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so what was kind of the main aim of the report? What were you guys kind of trying to really get out of the report? Not just kind of necessarily the results, but kind of just the overall goal.
Yeah, we quite a lot of our inspiration came from, there's a CNCF working group around this, and they created the Open GitOps principles. And we wanted to kind of test those and see if those principles made a difference. Sometimes you can have like a list of like these are requirements, and when you test
Yeah.
them, you find out that half of them aren't needed, and maybe there's some other things that are missing. So that was one of our inspirations was to test that.
Right.
And we wanted to work out like what were the controls if we tried to do things in a slightly different way, what would the outcomes be?
Right.
And yeah, I think we had about 16 separate hypotheses that we wanted to test.
Right.
And like we didn't go through and tick them all off afterwards. There were some that surprised us, and we were like, well, that's inconclusive, or that's the opposite of what we thought. But that's what we wanted to find out is like, can we actually say with certainty this is what good GitOps looks like, as
Right.
opposed to partial or, like different flavors that may not get you the benefits.
Sure. Okay. And yeah, and you said over 660 respondents to that. What were kind of some of the roles that you asked? Were they mainly kind of the people you surveyed? Were they mainly sort of developers or
Yeah,
platform
the
engineers?
common
Or
roles we had cloud infrastructure engineers,
Mhm.
DevOps engineers, developers, architects. There was like a whole range of technical roles. We did also get some responses from like senior execs and other
Mhm.
people who were involved in that GitOps process. And when we did the interviews, we were interested in speaking to some of those senior roles to find out if they're sponsoring people adopting GitOps, what were they
Right.
hoping to get for it as well?
Okay. So that's kind of more from the strategy side as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's like, why are we paying for this?
Okay, yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. And kind of just again broadly, just some of the questions that you guys asked, what were kind of some of the areas that you sort of dived into?
Yeah, so one of them was in adoption. We were asking, we didn't want to just say, are you using GitOps?
Hmm.
Because from the conversations we've been having already, like most people are using it somewhere.
Right.
So we actually asked people to give us an idea of how broad that adoption was, like how much of their production system is using GitOps.
Hmm.
And what we found is there's like a lot of people are quite early days in that kind of
Right.
0 to 20% range.
Right.
But there's also then people spread quite neatly out throughout the rest of it. So there are some people that are all in 100%,
Yeah.
everything is GitOps, and then everything in between. But that 0 to 20 was a bigger collection where people are just, they've kind of realized that this is a thing, and they're hearing people being successful with it. So they want to know, like, how do we get in on this? So they're trying it out at the moment. That was quite common. And then we kind of wanted to map that through.
Yeah.
So now we know they're using some GitOps. We wanted to kind of say which specific practices are you using? Are you using declarative or imperative configuration?
Yeah.
Because the principles say that you should use declarative
Mhm.
configuration. And then are you automatically pulling that and continuously reconciling it? Because some folks, they don't actually do continuous reconciliation. Maybe they
Mhm.
just do an alert and say something's changed, but I didn't want
Right.
to like put it back to where it should be because
Right.
like maybe we're not confident with the process yet.
Yeah.
So we wanted to dig in around that, and then follow that all the way through to if the benefits are things like better security
Yeah.
and easier audits and less production access, access rights. Were they getting those things? So that was how we could kind of validate back, if you adopt GitOps, will you get the benefits if you only pick 3 of the things that we found that you need, or do you need all 6 of the things that we found?
Right. Right. Okay. And you've written also a blog in regards to this. So I think you posted on LinkedIn as well about it. With some interesting areas. I think you covered sort of 4 key findings. I think in your blog, you mentioned things like better software delivery, increased reliability, security and compliance, and adoption of obviously as well overall is increasing. So
Yes.
what were kind of what were your thoughts around those 4 sort of key findings?
Yeah, so I mean, interestingly, this one's probably quite predictable. The more practices that you pick up and get good at, because you don't necessarily get the benefit on day one. Sometimes you need a bit of practice.
Hmm.
But the more of those practices you pick up, the more likely you'll get those outcomes that you want from GitOps, which is
Right.
around that kind of Having less people who need admin access is a classic one. The number of
Right.
times I've worked somewhere, and if something changes, you're like, who changed that? And it's like, well, 50 people can access this. Like, so any one of them could have done,
Right.
kubectl, change
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
It's going to take us a while to track it down. So, like, solving those problems happens way more once you've implemented the practices. And the people that are doing this and getting the benefits, they want to increase their adoption. So
Mm.
like 93% of the people we surveyed wanted to increase the amount of GitOps that they have in their organization. And a very tiny percentage wanted to reduce it. They were like, actually, maybe it's not for us.
Mm.
But we found that those that want to reduce it are very often the ones who aren't doing continuous reconciliation,
Right.
which is like that's like the key to unlocking the benefit. So
I see.
it's almost like they've done all this hard work, but they haven't done the piece that's going to make it pay back, and now they're thinking of retreating.
Right.
So like our message to all of those people is just take another couple of steps forward,
Yeah.
and you're going to
Yes.
get to the point where
You'll
it's
get
going
the
to work for
benefits.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I'm not, I think, like I said, yeah, it's actually interesting that you guys have kind of just dived into the nuances a little bit. And I think you mentioned that in your blog post as well. You're kind of distinguishing, I think you said, between the breadth, which is kind of the extent across production systems, and the depth, which is how many practices are implemented and how
Yeah.
well they're implemented. So that's interesting because you describe the process. And there's actually a diagram in your blog as well. So I'll make that available. Hopefully you can see that on the screen or somewhere. But that also kind of showed you the various aspects of sort of the process itself. And it's good that you've kind of dived a little bit deeper, right, into those and kind of actually said, yeah, are you, once you do your commits, are you actually doing the reconciliation or not, for example? Are you, doing this other aspect of it or not, the declarative aspect and whatever? And I think that's probably quite important because, like I said, I'm still trying to get my head around kind of, where it fits in and how it works and how would it kind of, how would that sort of tooling really fits in with your normal sort of CI/CD tooling and so on as well. So I think that's actually quite good. Okay,
Yeah.
were there any findings that actually surprised you?
Yeah, there's quite a big one. We looked at the relationship between each individual practice and each individual outcome to try and work out. We were trying to work out basically, can we throw any of these away? That was like the goal. If you're like, can we simplify this down? And what we found was different practices, so like human readable formats, help different outcomes than declarative desired state. So they do seem to be like covering gaps in other practices, which is interesting. So it's like a supporting set of ideas. But the surprise one in here is, and we asked this question only because in GitOps you're storing this stuff in version control.
Right.
We just asked, and we weren't expecting this to be a big finding. We just wanted to know how long it took people to get a code review approved.
Right.
Because we just thought that would be interesting information. What we found was code review speed is unlocking so much value. If you're doing GitOps but you have slow code reviews, you're actually stopping the benefits from accruing. Because if I have to wait 3 days for it to be approved, but I've put the change in because we have a problem that I'm trying to resolve, I'm being pushed to go and do it ClickOps style, right? Because I can't wait 3 days. So unless you have that speedy code review as part of your engineering kind of process, you're going to force people back down the ClickOps route. So you'll only be getting the benefit for your less urgent changes, and your urgent changes will all be missing from the audit logs, and they won't have been checked by anyone else, which means they'll be more likely to cause a knock-on problem.
Right.
And it'll be harder to understand the changes. And the next time there's an incident, you can't look back and see what you did before to solve it. So it's like you lose so many things. So that, responsive code review is like a huge modifier of all of the good stuff.
Okay, so that's kind of trying to, I guess the idea or the outcome of that's trying to kind of bring that a little bit closer to, or increasing well, decreasing that time, shall we say, for the code review, so that there isn't a gap between while that's happening, something else happens in the infrastructure. You got to go and sort that out by whatever means you're going to do that, and that change might actually affect what you just committed and is being reviewed right now. So by the time it's actually ready to go, hang on, there's still another problem, right? Because the code, the infrastructure's changed, and it may not kind of be exactly what this new code that you're about to deploy is expecting, right?
Yeah,
So that kind of defeats the object of what you're trying to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. The classic example would be, you've got unanticipated demand, right? Maybe you've advertised something and the adverts worked way better than you thought. So now there's this like increase in demand, and like you just want to increase your pods, right? Let's have more pods. We can easily deal with this demand. So if you can go in and make a change to increase the number of pods, commit it, someone approves it, it then updates your infrastructure. You now have all of that record of what's just happened. So if you ever have more demand in the future, your colleague can go and have a look. Oh, this happened before. Let's have a look at how they solved it. Oh, look, they just increased the pods of this service, and that was enough to solve it. So that knowledge is there. Plus, like you actually have the audit trail to show that you've increased them, and then it will show the decrease again when the peak is passed, because you'll put another change through. And it's like, if you can just make your version control your control plane for it all, it just, everything that it collects is then available, instead of it being like a partial picture.
Right. Yeah, excellent. And your blog, you also mentioned that the actual report itself dives sort of deeper and takes a bit of a diversion into actually GitOps itself as a technology. You say that a significant part of the report introduces the GitOps model itself, outlining 6 practices that are kind of necessary for successful adoption. So these include things like declarative desired state, human readable format, responsive code reviews, version control, as you said, automatic pull of the updates, and continuous reconciliation as well. So what is the kind of benefit for folks reading this, whether they're developers or the actual organization? What is the report going to help them with going forward, Steve?
So hopefully it will help them look at their current GitOps process, or if they're thinking of adopting it, thinking of that process they're going to introduce, and maybe do it just a bit better, right? So if you're one of the organizations that are missing some of these pieces, you might then see, oh yeah, we're missing those benefits as well. We could close that gap quite easily if we introduce this one extra practice. So it's all part of that improvement process. Teams can kind of take this and just make their GitOps that next level up, where they're going to get so much more value from their investment.
Right.
I suppose I'd kind of talk about that continuous reconciliation. For me, that's the real beating heart of the whole GitOps process.
Yeah.
But it's also really commonly absent. And it's just that either there's fear there, or it's like maybe people are getting all of the other things in place before they're ready to do that. But it's definitely a point we want everyone to get to, is like get that continuous reconciliation happening. I remember when I used to work on databases, we had this same journey, because databases, you used to handcraft them, right? You'd update your development environment. And when you needed to promote a test, there'd be this thing of trying to make the test database look like the dev database. And it was hard work to try and get that to flow through.
Yeah.
So we created projects to do this, right? It was like database as code. And then we define the schema, and our dev and our test and our production get automatically updated. And if I go in and I tweak something by hand, it gets completely wiped out back to where it should be by that automated process. And when that starts happening, there's really good motivation for you to make the change in the project, not directly to the database. And that's what we want for infrastructure as well, that same solid way of working.
Cool. And for those folks who are kind of looking to adopt GitOps, it's kind of peering through some of these areas of the report, as you said, diving deeper into the different aspects of GitOps, this could be also motivational for them to actually start looking seriously at DevOps, thinking, actually, it's not really that bad. Maybe we can kind of, slowly adopt some of the aspects of GitOps and start bringing in some of these tooling as well.
Yeah, and they will have done something similar before. Like, depending on how old they are, not everyone's as old as I am, so
Yeah.
like they may not have experienced it. But like when we were adopting version control, it was a bind at first because it was a different way of working.
Yeah.
But then, like 2 weeks later, you're like, why did we ever work without this? And
Right.
like each of these practices,
Yeah.
throughout my career, the database upgrades,
Yeah.
the deployment automation, monitoring, like they're a pain to kind of get going with, but then like you realize just how hard it was before you had them, and like the amount of waste that you had when you were having to try and work stuff out without those tools. So it's definitely worth the investment, and it's not just for Kubernetes. Obviously, that's one of the biggest areas where people are using it, but there are people using this for other things as well. They just have to use a slightly different technology, whether it's like ARM templates or Terraform or something else. It can be, you can find ways of applying it to other technologies.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.